I will use the money we're no longer spending on war to pay down our debt.
Is it true?
This is just not true. That's not going to cut our debt. You can't believe it. I don't believe it. The truth is...
I lied. The budget I asked for adds over $900 billion to the debt every year for the next decade. That's more than the defense budget.
If a CEO told a lie about his company's finances to get people to buy stock, I would be screaming fraud. I'd want him put in jail.
In fiscal year 2012, the national debt rose by $1,276 billion. He is asking to spend $82 billion a year less on wars by 2014. That is obviously not enough to be paying down the debt.
The math just doesn't add up. And I've got to expect that you will not be paying attention.
The debt sounds big, but this is a big country. Is it really something to worry about?
The personal debt of everyone in the country combined is less than $13 trillion. The federal debt is more than that, over $16 trillion. Imagine if we each had to pay our share.
Wow, that would be over $51,000 each. That is $121,000 per household.
I've asked to borrow $32,000 per household more through the next presidential term. The interest on the national debt will be larger than the defense budget by then.
The high interest cost means they will pressure the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low. That hurts people who keep their money in a bank or in bonds.
We earn less interest. This mostly hurts retirees and the poor. Rich people can invest in stocks instead. Estimates are we lose from $400 to $550 billion every year.
That burden will ultimately fall on our children's shoulders. If we don't act, the growing debt will eventually crowd out everything else, preventing us from investing. The money's going to have to come from someplace. You know what? This actually would make the recovery slower. Slower.
Every dollar loaned to the government is a dollar not invested in a private company to create jobs. If the government did not borrow the money, they would lend it to companies.
If you look at all the corporations in the country outside of banks and the financial world, they owe about $8 trillion combined. The federal government owes much more.
We are arguing over how much to grow spending, not about real cuts. Even if we simply stopped increasing spending and did not change taxes, the budget would balance in a few years.
I should explain that the debt problem is worse than it sounds. The current plan doesn't have enough money to pay for Social Security and Medicare in the future. When we make a promise we don't have money to pay for, we call it an unfunded liability.
The Treasury Department says the present value of our unfunded liabilities is $51 trillion. Adding in the national debt means the government is really short over $67 trillion.
That is more than estimates for the total wealth of everyone in the country combined.
Wow. That means you would need $500,000 per household now to pay for the promises politicians have made.
This is not an exaggeration. This is math.
Some say data from the Congressional Budget Office shows a very different amount. Our fiscal gap may really be $222 trillion. So did you give us an honest figure?
Many people think it is too low. In 2009, Treasury officials said unfunded liabilities were over twice what they say now, $107 trillion.
The question is whether you are being far too optimistic now for political reasons.
If the situation is worse than you admit, the government might need over $1 million per household to cover politicians' promises.
Some call this fiscal child abuse because young people in future generations will be paying for the favors politicians hand out now to get people to vote for them.
I was also trying to mislead people into thinking I spent less on the military than Republicans would have, and saved them money. Bush's last budget gave proposed military spending through 2013 including wars. I spent a few $100 billion more than he wanted to. I also told the Pentagon,
over the next 10 years, the growth in the defense budget will slow, but the fact of the matter is this: it will still grow.
That is spending on the core defense budget not including wars. A few weeks later I proposed a tiny 1% decrease for next year, and then increases for every year afterwards. If you adjust for inflation, the defense budget would decrease a tiny bit for a few years.
That was honest for once. Usually he and other politicians try to mislead the public. They plan government spending to increase every year. They call a smaller increase a cut.
That is absurd. That is like pretending that if I expected a $10,000 raise next year and only got a $5,000 raise, that I have my salary cut.
You told an unquestionable lie about paying down the debt. Why do you think most of the media ignored it?
Most journalists voted for me. Also, the White House gives them major news stories all the time. They want to stay on my good side so they are not left out. It isn't a good idea to bite the hand that feeds you.
He must think the public is too busy to look at the budget. What else is he lying about that we haven't checked? Do we really want to teach children it is okay to win by cheating?
Don't all politicians lie?
Many things people call lies really are not. Experts on each side merely disagree. This lie is obvious to everyone. It wasn't a one-time mistake, he repeated it for months.
Some lies are small, like telling your mother she looks thinner. This is huge. If we wouldn't trust someone to run our business, why should we trust them to run our government?
Why did you repeat your claim about paying down the debt so many times, starting with the State of the Union speech in January?
If you want to be president, you owe the American people the truth. So here's the truth. We will not let the truth get in the way. Pay down our debt. 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 We won't have the fact checkers dictate our campaign. Just make things up. The money's got to come from somewhere. It just comes from some magic tree somewhere.